So, anyone has questions for any of the speakers?
There's a lie. Thank you all very much. Hi, my name is Anita Bandrowski from the Neuroscience Information Framework. I work with Mary Ann, and one of the gateways for modeling, believe it or not. We can advertise that later. But in any case, I wanted to, first of all, share my very deep and appreciation of metadata. And one of the things I wanted to kind of try to ask the panel is if you had, if you had it all, if you had the ears of publishers, if you had the ears of your communities and societies, and the goal was to make science more reproducible, can you name like 2 things? And would your friends agree? And then could you just comment on whether or not it would be possible to actually implement those 2 things to make the science that's being done more reproducible?
I'll give it a shot.
All right, go for it, Tim.
I already said cite the data. So have a resolvable link to the primary data sets tied to the actual claims that are based on the data, and cite the important methods in a repository, such as those 2 things.
I can comment on things.
Mike?
I'm part of the SEDML group, which SEDML stands for Simulation Experiment Description Markup Language, and it's complementary to the STML. So STML describes the model, SEDML describes what you do with the model. SEDML can deal with the simulations you want to do, but also can bring in data. So the idea that follows a complete package as a zip file, people deposit with the journal. So somebody would just download that, load it to the paper software, and reproduce. The SPOL side is the same thing. Users would deposit an SPOL file with the paper that would allow somebody to recreate the design. So things that are happening, but it's a long slog.
I would just say I think a gateway framework can help with reproducibility too, because when you go through the web interface, you have dates capture of the software, you have when it was run, and you can kind of internally on the back end, even if the researcher isn't doing it, capture all of that stuff for them.
Could you tell that to all of your gateway?
I just want to say one thing, not even 2. Stop evaluating based on volume.
And I would say, from my point of view, 2 things, and one has already happened. So the last 3 years, there's been a group at W3C working on a provenance standard for the web. So through a provenance standard, you have a common way to actually represent links to claims or what a user is doing as far as activities or how the model was developed. So that's a basis for a standard, and it was just approved by the director last week, and it's a standard as of Friday, so after 3 long years. So we have that as a basis, and I think the second thing might be that any representation should build on that standard so that we have the way to cut across every aspect of the science that is done.
Please open. Hi, Mary Martone from UCSD. So to sort of get the discussion going on, for Phil's benefit and the people in the other room, everybody up here, a lot of people in the audience have lived through countless numbers of these big projects. We heard already about the Cell Alliance signaling. And I see the relative distribution between the people in this room and that room is exactly the problem that we've encountered over and over and over again, that the people who are talking about this are a small subset, and they do not believe that the people in the other room think this is just something that will be taken care of, but that they don't need to be concerned about it because the real problems are the biology and the real problems are the technology. So the panel, we've heard sort of discussions about this for this particular project, not science in general, because I think all of you have good suggestions. You know, again, we're all on the same team here. But for this project, is the relative distribution of people in this room versus that room going to be a critical flaw, going to be a problem, and is it solvable?
We didn't design the session.
I know.
I would just say, though, that looking in this room, I'm surprised how many people are in here. In my experience, it would be us five.
Well, you probably have speakers from 2 sessions in here too, but there are at least some people.
So I'm actually somewhat optimistic. There are actually a fair number of people over here. So compared to doing this 5 years ago,
How many people here without the blue dots?
What blue dot?
The blue dots. The speaker. Oh, they're not putting it on everyone? Okay, fine.
You're a special.
Bad idea. Okay.
How many people are not speakers in this session or the next one?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
That's pretty good.
I mean, it also boils down to the leadership, whether the leader has the right vision to make it work. The example you cited, I guess they had their own way of doing things, and it wasn't going to. We didn't. A number of us didn't believe the alliance signaling project was going to work. But we couldn't tell the leaders, of course, because they had their own ideas. So.
Right. So I think the way that people handle, at least NIH grants handle sort of requirements for data sharing, requirements for collaboration, and things like that, tends to be based on data sharing is good, therefore we just have a plan for it. Check. Collaboration is good, therefore we just have a plan for it. Check. And that's it. That's the last you hear about it. Right? And I think that the notion of gateways actually, because of Web 2.0 and 3.0 technology, the notion of gateways kind of starts to merge with the other forms of scientific communication, all the way up to including, or down to including, journals. We talked about this yesterday in one of the sessions, and I think that if one were to formalize the way that sort of requirements for participation in this project, so the participation in a gateway journal, something of that sort, were a success criterion for fulfilling your role, and that people were required to, software is a reagent, models are reagents, right? Publish those, share those in transparent ways, and things like that. I think that actually could be helpful.
So I think that, if I were a scientist, which I am, but if I were a biologist, I would want to be in the session where science is discussed, right? Not that I wouldn't care about these topics. And I think it's a natural thing that you might not see more biologists here. But I also think that it's, you're pointing to a problem, which is that scientists and computer scientists are not necessarily in projects at the same footing, right? So you see the PI is a scientist, the computer scientist is somewhere there, right? Or the PI is a computer scientist, the scientist is somewhere on the side, kind of advising, but they do their thing. So I think that we need to find ways to put both disciplines in the same footing. And in the discussions that we've been having on discovering informatics, actually there's a third leg to this picture, which is the social sciences. Because science is no longer about my group and you're going to do infrastructure and I'm going to do the science, but it's more about we need to do this whole collaboration, we need to have a community out there and making those things happen. There's some interesting science to that as well. So I think it's 3 footings, the social science, the computer science, and the science that we need to be better at doing.
There's a notion also that I think is useful here is if the goal is to produce something at the end, then I think Phil outlined that. He said, this has got to be analogous to a moonshot, right? We're going to have a goal, put a man on the moon, or whatever it is. That actually what we have to create in this project are essentially what are known in industry as value chains, right? So there are different biological information, it may be informatics and all the rest, and we have to be very aware that, as Yolanda said, you don't want to downgrade the status of one group in regard to another, or who's the guinea pig problem, right? I'm a computer scientist, you're the biologist, you're my guinea pig. No, you're my guinea pig, you're right, so.
I just wanted to share one brief comment, and then I'll turn it over. Last night, when I was preparing materials for this, I was on the version on OpenHelix of the feed from this. And it was interesting that the person who was posting this said, they say they're going to build a community. Went to the forum, no posts yet, but maybe they're just starting.
Another issue is if you're going to properly annotate things at any level, the first thing you need to do is you need to make it practical and easy. Ontologically annotating something is a royal pain in the ass. There are at least a dozen distinct styles. No biologist wants to wade through that BS. It's just BS. You've got to have a tool that takes care of all that nitty-gritty background, gets the syntax right for that 87-character long URI. Right. So the biologist never has to worry about that. Hopefully never ever sees it. And once he's done it once, doesn't have to redo it next week when he starts up in the morning. You've got to make this stuff easy. The NCBO BioPortal has some tools that are starting in that direction, but we can do a lot better at how we annotate models. The tools will give the users annotating models properly.
So I want to say add two things to this discussion. One is that whether you're on the science side or the infrastructure side, I would argue that dichotomy is going to persist for a while. How many people know who was the first man who landed on the moon? Pretty much all of you. How many of you know the group that made sure you got the live feed? Zero. That is going to remain. So in some sense, it's a career choice. And at some point you have to keep reminding the people who are landing on the moon that, look, you could land on the moon, but there won't be any evidence. Is that okay? And that sort of gets the point across. And so then there'll be some recognition for a couple of years, and then it goes down again, and then you bring up the argument again. So I think this is going to persist, but it's important to stand up and say this needs to be recognized. For a very long time, content management and curation was a second-class enterprise. Or worse, exactly. I remember when in 2005 I was deciding, what to do after my PhD. I asked a senior Stanford professor that there was a curator job available at PharmGKB, and then there was a scientist job available at SMI. And the advice I got, I won't name the person who gave the advice, was take the other job because the curator job has no path to an assistant professor position. The guy was right. I mean, it's not bad advice. So that will remain. Gotta keep bringing it up over and over again. And the second thing is that instead of arguing about the size of the community, it is more appropriate to have arguments about the business function that is satisfied or done by people who are in this room. So for a while, IT was, poo-pooed on in manufacturing, And now GE is getting on front stage saying we are big data. I mean, come on, they're building engines. So it's also a matter of marketing the discipline about the value of what we do. So those are the two things I would say. I mean, there will be a dichotomy, but it's up to us to stand up and say, do you want the evidence of landing on the moon?
I've had this discussion before, and I think one of the problems that we have is by having a serious disconnect. And, again, living through 1,000 grid projects that are UCSD and all the different things that I've seen happen over and over and over again, thought Herbert's comment were exactly right. First of all, there's a layer that is not the PIs that do most of the work. And in fact, the PIs usually get in the way. Okay, because the PIs are building their labs, they're concerned about all of this, they have the usual academic, requirements. And yet there's usually a layer that functions very effectively, but when the PIs get involved, it screws things up, okay? Because the people who are underneath generally work collaboratively. That's why they joined, right? So I think that that's an observation. The second thing, though, the reason why I think that this is an important thing, for the reasons you said, is that the sort of passive support versus the science itself, as you can see in this project, those two things are the same. That it's not just we're going to produce a lot of data and dump it. I don't just have a data citation. Everyone here knows working with data is tough. We know that these things are tough. And what I want to suggest is that the way that this is going to have to work to make this useful is my experience as a biologist is biology is doing science, computer science is doing computer science. Even if they're recognized as equal partners, they go parallel and they do not intersect. And they do not intersect because the way these projects are typically set up is the biologists are rewarded for how many science papers they produce. And these guys are rewarded for cool systems and cool algorithms. And you can spend 3 years trying to use these standards, trying to use these tools, trying to find meaningful feedback, and you will not get your science paper published because the infrastructure will stand in the way. But yet at the end, you want that infrastructure as the persistent thing that you have created. You have created a better standard, a better set of tools. And without that meaningful interaction between the biologists and the tool builders, you will not get that. You will continue on parallel tracks. They will both have their citations, they will both have their successes, but as we know, analytics is a dark art. You can say, yes, this actually works, but when in fact we know it does not work. So I'm suggesting that for this type of project, that one of the things you want to make sure is that part of the reward systems and the metrics are your interaction with the system, so that you get rewarded as a biologist for the more times you complain about bugs, you do all the things that Nancy said, all the time you put in user requirements, but not just, oh yeah, it'd be nice if I had this tool, but I don't really need it. I'm going to go off and do what I want. And I see this over and over again. So I just think, again, for purposes of posterity, so that we have this recorded, that these sorts of discussions now need to be done, because otherwise we'll see it's again and again and again and again and again.
And I have a question for you. So, 'cause I think you hit on a very important point, this parallel path thing, and we're going to get rewarded for building the cool system and write papers about the system. But
Yes.
at the same time, so guess what? You can't use it because it won't exist for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
5 years.
Mhm.
So, how do you? Would it be possible to start I love the hello world model, right? So you start with something that's dead simple and say, this is what you're going to use now, right? And you have an iterative path where people can still build their cool infrastructure by iterating on that, and scientists can use each iterative version as it becomes available. Is that possible?
That's really not, it's not. But I think that these are the sorts of things I would like to see in this proposal thought through, because I think we need to know these things.
And I think a lot of those things could actually start with just an SVN. Right? We'll start with SVN. That's our ontological repository. That's our model repository. That's our data repository. And we'll link to it a very brain-dead ontological term.
Yeah.
Keywords for every file.
That's it. So from day one, you do this.
Day one. And as we build on the system, we can do it better. We can actually start trying to reason over things. But from day one, we'll start with Turtle SVN, and we'll add a couple of widgets on the side so you can add keywords.
scientists, the computer scientists, the social scientists. I mean, this three pillars to a collaboration like the one that we're discussing here. But a lot of us talk about the science versus the computer science. So to dwell in that for a moment, I think that we mix in the computer science box very different things. So to me, I don't see myself as I'm serving a scientist. I publish papers in the best conference because I'm advancing the state of the art of computer science, and so are people in the panel, right? You as well. So you advance computer science. At the same time, in doing a practical application that's operational, there's a lot of grunt work that you need to do. You need to connect this with the HTML5 interface, and the button is not the right size, or whatever. And there's a lot of grunt work that needs to be done, and we bulk that together with the computer science work that needs to happen. And so there's a lot of just not very exciting work, and that often falls in the computer science side to do. And I think that scientists, maybe I'm not a biologist, but my view is that they really understand what it takes to collect the samples, to run them through the lab, what kind of support and infrastructure they need. And as computer scientists, maybe we're not as aware of that. And so I worry that maybe it's not science and computer scientists, but I think it's science researchers support to get that science done that they have in the labs, the collection infrastructure, and so on. And in the computer science, we need to start to acknowledge that there's the computer science research to answer the really hard questions. How do we represent pathways? That's basic research. How do we represent annotations of claims and so on? That's basic research. How do we manage advanced workflows? That's basic research. And another group that can do the piping and the basic, system building that needs to happen. And so I think that within computer science, we need to start to manage that better, and we don't do a good job of that, I think.
No, I think that's true, and I think this points to Nancy's thing, and again, this is just for the benefit. You have to decide in the beginning whether you're building a product or you're doing research. And I've seen this, and I saw this before with Bern and all the others. What you pointed out was a fundamental problem, and I, as a biologist, confused programmers with computer scientists. We'll never do that again.
But this is, we often speak as if it was the same thing. So James, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, two things. One, real quick. First of all, this is a little bit different than, say, the Pathway project, because everybody in the project is a computational person, right? The modelers are not wet lab people. They're computational people. So it's a little bit different. We don't have wet lab biologists and informatics people. We have informatics people and informatics people. It just happens slightly different. Yeah. So. Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. But the modelers don't. They generate. They're computer people. And the second thing I wonder, how many people in this room actually run models? So I think that also differentiates this particular group from most other groups, is that we have a fair number of people that are interested in ontologies and description and evidence, who are also the people that are running some of the models. We don't have this great chasm between people that want to do ontologies and people that are actually, quote unquote, doing all the work, and they really don't care about annotation and evidence. It's an interesting group.
So one thing I want to comment on what you were saying, the tension between the experimentalists and everybody else. In both the modeling community and the synthetic biology community, they were started because there was a need. So I think that's partly why it worked, because people wanted to, they bought into it, because you're satisfying a need in the community. And if this community is created, they have to find the need. And if they don't do that, they'll get what you suggest, where they all go off at angles.
I think it's a little bit easier than it was in the early 90s. I lived through a lot of these shotgun marriages. The world has changed a lot. There's a lot more information for digital. There's informatics, everything. So I think there's a lot more recognition of the need for the technological support.
Yeah, but an actual need to solve a particular problem.
Yes, agreed.
The imaging people may have a specific problem. The segmentation isn't very good for this system. What can you do about it?
Well, and one saving grace actually is that the
you get fun in doing it? Is there fun in doing it? If there's no fun in doing it, do something else.
So I wanted to ask a question. Maybe this is the wrong audience, but maybe some of you have experienced this. So I have this perception, and I would like to know if it's right or wrong, that there's often the experimentalists that propose models, and then there's the theoreticians that propose models. And so, I hear all this talk about models, but it seems that they're also pretty separate. And so that's also a kind of integration that needs to happen. And there's the science aspects of that integration, but there might also be some computer-supported facilities to do that. So I wonder what's up with that, and is it true that it happens, and how can we help bridge that gap? Or do we care?
In my experience, nobody knows how our model's actually built. We don't, at the end of the 2-year-long project, nobody quite knows how we got from here to there. So many decisions were made, so many people had input, things were tried and thrown away and came back, and you kind of have lost track of, well, this was my part of the model, that was his part of the model, that was their part of it. And at the end of the day, a complex model it's unclear where it all came from. That's a bit of a problem.
But my question was, what are the difficulties in integrating these models as they are developed?
What kinds of models?
You pick.
Well, again, the experience we have is that the biologist walks in and he has some model, tumor growth angiogenesis, VEGF, tumors need oxygen, not enough oxygen, release VEGF, vasculature grows. That's the biological model. Computational scientist says, well, cells now have to have size. How big is the cell? Oxygen diffuses. Okay, what's the diffusion constant? How do I model diffusion? The oxygen is consumed and supplies. What are those rates? You have to go back to the biologist, and now his biological model has to kind of extend it out into a more mathematically rigorous model. At some point, the biologist finally says, quit asking me these stupid questions and go build a model. And that's what you do. You say, okay, ask as much as I can get out of them to see if I can build a model that works. If it does, great, publish it. If it doesn't, you go back to me and try and find something else. Modeling is very much a very, very iterative process.
So I'm going to try to take a shot at this very difficult question. There's lots of reasons these two models would not integrate or talk to one another. But the top 3 or 4, again, this is opinion based on just literature survey, is that different formalisms, differing levels of abstraction, and different interpretation of what comprises context. Those, I think, are the top 3 reasons that you get incompatible models.
And different technical capabilities of the individuals as well.
Okay, I think I'm going to end the session here. Thank you very much, and apologies.
I would say that a model doesn't have to be correct.
Thank you.
That's probably right.